Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. I hope you are safe and sound. Stay home, stay safe. I'm your instructor Maria Farooq, and today we will start our first poem, All But Blind by Walter de la Mare. Kindly open your books in front of you so that you may understand in a better way. So let's get started. All But Blind. This is the first poem of your book, The Magic Casement, and it is written by Walter de la Mare. So the name of the poet is Walter de la Mare. Now, as far as the central idea or theme of this poem is concerned, it gives a very different and unique concept that nobody knows the whole truth of this universe except God. So, only God knows the whole truth about this world, about this universe. And apart from Him, nobody knows the whole truth behind all this. Okay? So, while reading this poem, you should keep in your mind that the central idea or the theme of this poem is that only God knows the whole truth of this universe or this world. Okay. Now, as far as this poem is concerned, in this poem, the poet gives different examples. For example, in the first stanza, he refers to mole. Mole is an animal. Then in the second stanza, he refers to bat. And in the third stanza, he refers to owl. So we human beings, we consider them as blind. Or we think that they cannot see properly. I mean mole, bat, owl. We think that they cannot see properly. So somehow we consider them blind. So in the same way, there is someone who is superior than human beings and who considers somehow human beings as blind creatures. Blind in the sense that they have limited faculties, limited sense of sight or vision. And who is that someone? God. So you should keep 2 points in your mind. Number 1, human beings consider bat, owl, mole as blind. They think that they cannot see properly. Human beings think that mole, bat, and owl, they cannot see properly. They have limited faculties. So in the same way, second point is that human beings are considered as blind or creatures with limited faculties or sense of sight by God. So who has the ultimate power? God. Then human beings. Then animals. So 3 categories. Animals are considered blind by human beings, and human beings are considered as creatures with limited faculties by God. So this is the idea. Okay? Now I'm reading the first stanza for you. All but blind, in his chambered hole, gropes for worms the 4-clawed mole. Second stanza. All but blind, in the evening sky, the hooded bat twirls softly by. Now third stanza. All but blind, in the burning day, the barn owl blunders on her way. And now the last and the fourth stanza. And blind as are these 3 to me, so blind to someone I must be. So I have just read this poem for you, and if I go to the next slide, which deals with difficult words and meanings, so you should note down all these difficult words and meanings with you, because it will be easy for you to understand. So chambered hole, basically it refers to mole, and mole is an animal which lives underground and digs a small hole from the surface. So he makes chambers for him itself, or you can say he digs hole. Fine. Then number two, gropes. Gropes mean to search blindly by feeling with the help of hands. Fine. Just like you are searching for something, your eyes are closed, so you search with the help of your hands. Then number three, twirls. Twirls, to turn quickly in the air. Swirl, twirl. Okay. Number fourth, barn owl. Owl, we know, you know what is an owl? And an owl who prefers to live in the barn at daytime because he can only see in the dark. So that's why we call him barn owl, because he prefers to live in the barn. And barn is, you can say, a kind of storeroom where grains are kept. Fine. You should write down with you the meaning of barn as well. It is a kind of storehouse in which grains are kept or stored. Barn. Okay. And fifth one, blunders, making mistakes. Okay. So you should note down all these meanings with you. And now let's go back to the previous slide. Let me explain these lines for you. Starting from the first stanza, all but blind in his chambered hole, gropes for worms the four-clawed mole. So in this stanza, the poet tells us about, or he gives an example of mole, which is an animal. Fine. And I have already told you that he digs hole from the surface. So somehow he makes chambers for himself. Okay. Then gropes for worms. Gropes, to search blindly. Just like in the hole, or when the mole is under the ground, he finds, or he looks for worms, okay, to eat them. But he cannot see properly. So with the help of his claws, you see in the next line it's written the four-clawed mole. Four-clawed, clawed means, you can say, claws are curved nails on the toes. Fine. So when mole is under the surface or under the ground, he looks for worms in order to eat them, but he acts as, you can say, or he is blind at that time. He cannot see properly. Okay. So in the first stanza, we are introduced to mole, who looks for food with the, or you can say, who searches, or you can say that the mole is helpless without eyes, you see, because he faces difficulty in searching the food. So this is the idea of this stanza. Okay. Next, all but blind in the evening sky, the hooded bat twirls softly by. Now in this stanza, we are introduced to bat. In the first stanza, the poet gives an idea, or this example of mole, and now in this stanza specifically, he gives an example of bat. Okay, all but blind. In the evening sky, the hooded bat twirls softly by. So here again, the blindness of bat signifies that it's helpless without sight and darkness. Fine. So helpless in the sense that there is a difficulty to find its way. So just like mole is blind to us, bat is also blind to us. We consider bat as blind. Okay. Twirls softly by. Twirls, to turn quickly in the air to find its way. For example, let me give you an example. When you cannot find your way, or when you cannot see properly, so then you stagger while walking. Fine. You try to somehow touch the things with your hands in order to take their support. So all but blind in the evening sky, the hooded bat. Hooded is from hood. Fine. If you see or if you look at the bat, so there is something like hood on its body, so that's why it is called the hooded bat. Okay. Third stanza. Now in this stanza, the example which is given to us is of owl. All but blind in the burning day, the born owl blunders on her way. I have already told you the meaning of barn owl. Blunders, making mistakes, on her way. So, mole, then bat, and now owl. So, barn owl, she also finds difficulty while proceeding towards the barn. She faces difficulties without, somehow you can say, eyes, without sight, because a barn owl can only see in the dark. Okay, so in the first stanza, example of mole is given. In the second stanza, example of bat is given. And in the third stanza, example of owl is given. So human beings, they consider mole, bat, and owl blind, or who cannot see properly. So in first three stanzas, this is the idea. Now fourth and the last one. And blind as are these three to me. Now the poet is addressing himself, or he talks to himself, that just like I consider mole, bat, and owl as blind, so blind to someone I must be. So there is someone who considers me as blind. And who is that someone? God. So the poet says that just like he considers mole, bat, and owl blind, so in the same way, the poet himself is considered as blind by someone. And who is that someone? God. So this is the idea of this poem, all but blind. And who has this ultimate power and who is superior? Only God. Man has limited faculties. Man can never know the whole truth of this universe. Who knows the whole truth of this universe? Of course, God. Fine. So that's why, if you could see at the title of this poem, all but blind. All are blind except God. And blind, it signifies that limited faculties. Limited faculties means that one cannot be a God, or one cannot have all those traits of God, and specifically this trait of, you can see, vision, sight. So man has limited faculties. Man cannot be God. Okay? So you can say that this word blind, it's symbolic. It stands for something. And what is that? Limited faculty of man. Limited traits. That man cannot be God. Okay? So let's proceed. Okay, so you have already noted down with you difficult words and their meanings. Yes, this is the picture of mole. This is mole, which we have studied in the first stanza. Fine, this is mole. I just wanted to show you. Okay. Now on this slide, I will tell you about rhyme scheme of this poem. And what is rhyme scheme? I have already explained when I was teaching you features of poetry or elements of poetry, that rhyme scheme, you can say same sound words. For example, sky, by, whole, mole. These words are rhyming words. Why? Because they have same sound. Okay, so let me read the lines for you. All but blind in his chambered hole gropes for worms the four-clawed mole. So hole and mole, same sound. So we always start with A. So blind A, hole B, worms C, and mole again B. Why again B? Because mole has the same sound just like hole. So whole and mole, they have same sounds, so BB. Okay, next. All but blind. Now blind is repeated. It has the same sound just like we studied in the first stanza, blind. So again blind is A. Fine. Let me tell you something, that as far as a rhyme scheme is concerned, when we write rhyme scheme, we always take a start from A, B, C, D. But when we find that the word or the words are rhyming, so then it remains the same, just like B, B, A. Now I cannot write C here in the next stanza, this word blind. I cannot write C or D. Why? Because blind has the same sound, just like it's repeated. Just like in the first stanza, there was also blind. So again, this blind would be A. In the evening sky. Now sky has a different sound, so D. The hooded bat. Bat has a different sound, E. Twirls softly by. Now by has the same sound just like sky, so DD. Okay, then next, all but blind in the burning day. Now blind, again it's repeated, so it would be A. In the burning day, day has a different sound, so F. The barn owl blunders on her way. Blunders, G. On her way, day, way. Way has the same sound just like day, so F, F. Okay, and the last stanza. And blind as are these three to me, so blind to someone I must be. R, H, me, I, someone, different sound hai, so J, and B, me, B, so I. Fine. So how do you write rhyme scheme? I have written, you can see, rhyme scheme A, B, C, B, A, D, E, D, A, F, G, F, H, I, J, I. Okay. So girls, here I would suggest you that you should write on Google search bar how to find rhyme scheme. Then you will have number of examples over there. You can watch on YouTube as well in order to understand better, okay? That how to find rhyme scheme. Okay. Now, exercise. If you could see in your books on the next page, exercise. And 3 questions are given. Question number 1 is, comment briefly on the poet's use of the word blind. What other words reinforce our awareness of the blindness of the mole and the owl? Fine. So you have to comment briefly on the use of this word blind. What does it signify? So the answer is with you. The use of the word blind by the poet signifies the blindness of the senses and faculties of man. I have already told you this word blind, it's symbolic. It stands for something. It signifies something. And what is that? Limited faculties and senses of man. Man is not perfect. He has limited faculties. Then, as a blind man, unable to see anything, feels around for his way and comes to know where his way lies, in the same manner, limited senses and faculties of man make him ignorant of the whole truth about the universe. Okay, so this is the answer of first part of the question. And what is the first part of the question? Comment briefly on the poet's use of the word blind. That what does this word signify? This word signifies or demonstrates that man has limited faculties and senses. He cannot be a god. So, just like a blind man who is unable to find his way, man is also ignorant of the way or of the whole truth of this universe. Okay, now dear girls, on this slide I will explain or I will answer the second half of question number 1. In the previous slide if I go back on this slide, you see, I tried to answer the first half of question number 1. Comment briefly on the poet's use of the word blind. So on this slide, the answer of first half of question number 1 is written. And on the next slide, this one, as I have underlined the second half of the question, what other words reinforce our awareness of the blindness of the mole and the owl? So now I will explain the answer of this part of question number 1, which is second part or second half. Okay, so this question means that whether there are certain other words which are used in the poem to support our idea or awareness that mole and owl, they are blind or they cannot see properly. So yes, there are two important words which are used in the poem and which suggest that mole and owl, they are somehow blind or they cannot see properly. And what are those two words? Let me read them out. So the answer is, the other words which reinforce our awareness of the blindness of the mole and the owl are gropes and blunders. When we were studying the poem text, so we studied these two words, gropes and blunders. Because gropes means to feel around and only a blind object can feel around. Fine. So what is the meaning of this word gropes? This word was used in the poem to search for something by feeling with the help of hands, because you cannot see properly with eyes, so you search with the help of your hands. Then another word is blunders. Fine. And which means to make mistakes. So this word was also used in the third stanza for owl, that barn owl on her way to barn commits mistakes, commits blunders. Fine. So let me read it out. The word blunders means to make mistakes. The owl, who is dazzled by the sunlight, has to feel its way, committing blunder. So these words tell us of the blindness of the mole and the owl. Fine. So owl cannot see in sunlight. He is dazzled by sunlight. So the word dazzle means when you cannot see properly in sunlight. So the use of these two words, gropes and blunders, which we studied in the poem, these two words are very important, because with the help of these words we get to know that mole and owl, they cannot see properly, or we can say that these words tell us about the blindness of the mole and the owl. Okay, now question number 2. How does the last stanza contrast with the first 3, and how do the first 3 lead up to it? Now this question means, you see, total there are 4 stanzas in this poem. So in the first 3 stanza, example of mole, bat and owl is given, but the 4th stanza is different from the first 3. Why? Let's find out. In the first 3 stanzas, poet tells us about the blindness of the mole, the bat and the owl. Fine, their limited senses and faculties, so they have to face difficulty in the achievement of their goal. So when we were studying and when I was explaining those stanzas, so in the first stanza we studied about mole, in the second stanza we studied about bat, in the third stanza we studied about owl, but as far as the 4th stanza is concerned, there was something about man and God. There was nothing about any animal. So first 3 stanza, you can say they are different from the last stanza. Also the last stanza, you can say it is different from the first 3 stanzas. So in the same way, man is blind to God as he is unaware of the whole truth about the universe because of limited senses and faculties. Thus, the first 3 stanzas contrast with the last one and they lead to it. In first 3 stanzas, we are given examples, different examples about animals or birds, you can say, mole, bat, owl. But in the last stanza, there is nothing like that. The last stanza is very different from the first 3 stanzas. And what was discussed in the last stanza? Man and God. That how man is considered as blind by God, because man has limited senses and faculties. He is not perfect. Who is perfect? God. And who knows the whole truth about this universe? Of course, God. Okay? Now, question number 3. Briefly explain what idea the poem expresses. Briefly give your own views on the truth of this idea. So on this slide, I have written the answer of first part of this question. Briefly explain what idea the poem expresses. The poem expresses this idea that man has got limited senses and faculties, and thus he is unable to know the whole truth about the world. So, God is far more superior than man's senses and faculties. So, he knows the whole truth about the universe. He, capital H, it stands for God. So, what is the idea, central idea or theme of this poem? That man is unable to know the whole truth of this universe. And who knows the whole truth about this universe? God. Okay? Now, the second half of this question, briefly give your own views on the truth of this idea. Now, you will give me your views. You will tell me, do people agree with me? And up to what extent you people agree with me? Or what's your point of view regarding this? You may write in the comment bar, you may tell me, you may contact me. So you will tell me about your views. Okay? Thank you.